traveled from across India, and I think India is so beautifully represented. And this morning I thought to myself, I also might as well wear colors that represent India, and hence the colors that you see on me. But thank you so much. You're all very erudite, very learned, and I'm sure that what I have to say you already know. Yet for the sake of it, I'm sure we will stir up some kind of an interesting discussion. This is not, I'm repeating, this is not a monologue. This is going to be a dialogue. So please pitch in as much as you can. Please enjoy the session. Please try and contribute as much as you can. You can disagree. We can go back with some dissent. Some dissent can, I'm sure, will result in some sparks. And sparks are what going to add color and interest to this session. In fact, every time Ravi invites me for a session, I must say, Ravi, I'm very thankful to you. That's the only time I go sit down and read up a little during the night. So some kind of research happens. Because otherwise, I think as school leaders, all of us, I'm sure, agree that we are caught up with such humdrum existence every single day, and so swamped with work that you don't really have any fruitful, you don't spend fruitful time on learning. Ideally, every leader should be learning all the time and unlearning and then relearning. We keep proclaiming it all over the world as a cliche. However, I think this is the only time, Ravi. And I must also compliment you that you bring the best minds in the industry together. I think he deserves a loud round of applause for that. And I did tell him that good people gravitate to Ravi because of his innate goodness. And I'm sure many of you agree, because he's such a fine human being that everybody would want to be associated with him, because everybody knows that he genuinely wants to contribute to the cause of education. No, I'm not. You are putting that in my mind. Master of positive bullying. All right. Okay. I think I should be there, not here, so that everybody can participate. If we talk about private-public partnership in the field of education, I'm sure all of you would feel that this is a self-explanatory term when we say private-public partnership. Something that was mooted in the 11th five-year plan by the government with a purpose and a mission. The mission and purpose was to ensure that public education, which was probably not of a level which is expected, should benefit with the private partners making a foray into education. That was the whole idea behind the PPP, or the private-public partnership. So allowing private players who had the money and the wherewithal to make a foray into education, so that education would be elevated, because perhaps public resources were not good enough, infrastructure was not good enough, delivery was not good enough, and probably staffing was not appropriate. So to enhance the quality of education, the government sought investment from private players for the sake of innovation. So this was meant to be a collaborative effort. Well, that's very broadly how I perceived the private-public plan. And then Planning Commission decided to set up some schools in some very backward areas, giving government subsidies. Most of these schools were asked to educate a large number of young people who did not have resources or money to be able to secure or procure education. So at an almost token fees, these young people were educated. The deal was that with such heavy government subsidies, these schools, which was set up as private-public partnership, should educate these young people, and in lieu of that, they would continue to get the support of the government or the government subsidies. So, taking this forward, obviously the intention was very, very noble. Sonam, would you like to say something before I proceed? No? So the intention, as I said, was a very, very noble intention. But do you think the intention has remained noble? That's the question to mull over. Let's first talk about what do you think as a group, as educators, most of you are educators, what could have been some of the advantages that the planners would have envisaged? Anybody please? What could have been some of the advantages of a nexus or a partnership like this between a private-public partnership? What kind of advantages would you envisage? You don't see any advantages?
Maybe the children who are not exposed to the better education because of the private sector could get those opportunities to get exposed to better education, facilities, infrastructure, good teachers. Yeah, that could be.
Students who could not afford to go to good schools would probably get some opportunity to be able to get to these schools and enjoy better facilities and enjoy better infrastructure. Any other advantage that you see?
Knowledge sharing.
Knowledge sharing, most definitely. Would you elaborate a little more on that?
So the public, we as educators, we are trying to do as much as possible, and when you have a collaborative approach, the knowledge that comes enriches both the parties. So it is enhancing, enriching and empowering each one, drawing from each other's experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the major task of education is not merely passing on education per se. Education is a very broad term. It's also making young people socially responsible and socially responsive. And what can get better than this? When in a class, you have people from different stratas of society who are mingling freely. They're obviously contributing something to the well-being of these children who are from the so-called less privileged class, and they're also learning something. They may be picking up skills, real-life skills, because children who come from that strata of society are obviously sometimes better equipped with real-life skills. They have better skills of coping. Can somebody give an example? Children who come from the lower strata of society, we can't just, we can't wave them away because they have much better coping skills compared to children who come from privileged homes. So they may have something to contribute. Colonel Shekhar shaking his head.
No, this PPP conversation, there is a presupposition that by definition private schools are superior to government schools. I have my considered thoughts on that. Yes, at some level private schools do a better job at many levels. However, the supposition that we are better, we are talking a patronizing language, which is what I have a question about. One. Secondly, PPP models, especially in a country like India, should specifically be private sector hopefully brings in competence and excellence. Public sector does it for scale. Without India's, we have something like 15 lakh schools in India.
Right.
CBSE is 20,000, ICSE is about 2,500, and the so-called international schools about 1,000.
Right.
The rest 14.5 lakh are in the 30-odd boards which we have in the state governments. Right? Unless and until we make a considered effort to do that. And further to it, that's into the higher education space, only 25% of all our school students post-12th reach college. The rest 75%, where they go into the black hole of the universe, we have no clue. And then they land up with politicians who will make them do stuff for 750 rupees and do biryanis. That's the fundamental challenge we look at. So can we look at it holistically, please?
Yeah. I just wish to say, Colonel Shekhar, that definitely sounds patronizing when I'm probably demarcating the two, right? Is that what you feel? I'm demarcating.
No, there is a presupposition that everything about the private sector...
No, not everything, but most of what I'm saying applies to the private. Most of what I'm saying applies to the private.
Bali, I think I must come between you and Colonel Shekhar. You see, when you are saying public partnership, I see there is no patronizing in it. It is absolutely wrong to say that there is an underlying assumption that private schools are doing better. What we are saying is that entire responsibility of quality education is that of a state. This is number one. Since the state cannot do it alone, should private partners come into this one?
Right,
The
right.
quality and the merit will come later. So when you are opening this discussion, it is about how much partnership we should have, at what
I'll
condition.
come to that. I'll definitely.
So there is no
There was a slight digression, but I think I'll come to that. I'll come to that. So I was talking in terms of advantages. What is it that private players can offer? A public setup. Definitely, they can pump in funds. They can bring in better infrastructure. They can sometimes provide better teachers. They can definitely provide better pedagogy. And they can give a lot of support. But of course, there has to be a certain degree of commitment. At the same time, there could be a flip side, and I'm going to use a phrase which I'd like any one of you to explain. These schools can sometimes become voucher schools. Voucher schools. What do you think a voucher school is? Anybody here? A voucher school. You know, the post-lunch session is really a graveyard session. Take them up, people? Can do that?
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, 180%. Instead of saying that no, you go to a government school, or I will send you to a private school, you give me the cost 3,000 rupees. With 3,000 rupees, I have a choice. I can go to GT Goenka Gurgaon, or I could go to a school in Chennai. I mean, I have the choice. So voucher does that good.
Right.
But then there are flip sides.
Yeah.
to this.
What is the flip side? That's what I'm trying to get at. What's the flip side of being a voucher school? Some of these schools are, ultimately they become voucher schools. After a span of 10 years, anybody like to answer that, or should I answer? Shall I answer? The question was that some of these schools, private players, who are supposed to work for a certain span of time with the state, eventually become voucher schools. Because the purpose of the collaboration peters off, and then they finally turn into completely private schools over a period of time. And then it deteriorates into crass commercialization. Very often it deteriorates into a crass commercialization. It is in their power to charge fees, because the government intervention is generally very minimal. So it is in their power to charge fees, so they can escalate the fees. So they ultimately foil the purpose for which these public-private partnerships have been set up. You wish to make a comment? You wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I felt like the other flip side to it would also be they're limited by time. PPPs don't work indefinitely. So while at the end of the lease period, again, the promoters would be at the risk of not putting in their best or not particularly giving commensurate return when they know that it's going to fall back.
Let's talk about what would help this partnership to succeed.
My point is, what returns are you expecting? The first point.
See, why should you not expect returns?
Now, why should you expect returns which are far beyond? I've been part of this. Why should you expect a return?
No, you shouldn't get it. There should be complete transparency. You should only get into a partnership knowing what kind of returns you should expect.
Right. No, what happens is after the initial phase,
Yes.
where it's 3 years, 5 years, etc.
10 years,
And
approximately.
after that, there is a presupposition that I can make a certain degree of profit.
Yes.
While this PPP model fundamentally goes by the point that beyond what the 10-12% with the Supreme Court has mandated, we should stay within those norms. It doesn't quite happen. The land is ours, the infrastructure is ours. Why don't I do it the way I want?
Absolutely.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. I agree. It deteriorates into crass commercialization. That's why I talked about a voucher school over a period of 10 years or something. These PPP schools finally deteriorate into private schools, where definitely the idea is to make profit. Okay, it would be like maybe manufacturing automobiles. The same way you'll be teaching children. Value-driven education doesn't happen. Over a period of time, whatever enthusiasm is there also dies out, a natural death. So although these schools are envisaged as great contributors, it doesn't necessarily mean that these partnerships culminate in the kind of impact that one wants these partnerships to make. You have to very, very carefully harness the forces of these collaborations, the power of stakeholders. However, there is a lot of global evidence, particularly in reports of FICCI. If you look at the reports of FICCI, there is a lot of global evidence to show, maybe in India it may not have worked well, but in the UK, in USA, in Uganda, this model has worked very well. It has worked very well. And the advantage, one of you mentioned that the advantage of having a model like this is, with this partnership you can considerably reduce the dropout rate. A lot of children who go to regular government schools tend to drop out. But with this, with good teachers and with good infrastructure, the dropout rates will reduce considerably. I don't know if you look around, a lot of us have women working for us, women who come from a class where they're supposed to work in homes, domestic help. Even those choose public schools, so-called public schools or private schools over government schools. Do they, or they always choose a government school? A lot of them choose private schools, even though it is very difficult for them to pay for these private schools, because they're definitely more expensive than the government schools. A lot of them choose because they somewhere they imagine that the kind of inputs their children are likely to get in private school will be far more efficacious than what the child is likely to get in a government school. Now, I'd just very quickly like to ask some of you, how do you think we could make this model little more efficacious? It is working. By the year 2030, it should come into full force. It has got its flaws. There are a lot of things that slip through the crack. But as educators, when you run a model like this, how can you make it more efficacious? This table would like to comment. Anybody at this table? No? Anyone there? आप मैम एक माइक ले लो।
जो एक ये आपने अभी बोला कि एक मेड अगर जो थोड़ा सा कमाती है वो प्राइवेट स्कूल में बच्चों को भेज दी, उसके पीछे एक रीजन मेन क्या है मैम कि गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में वो बच्चे अभी आते हैं जो एक रूम में रहते हैं और वो सारी सिचुएशन को देखते हैं और उसका इम्पैक्ट बड़ा गलत दूसरे बच्चों पे जाता है। वो पब्लिसिटी जो होती है तो पेरेंट्स अपने बच्चों को गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में भेजने से थोड़ा सा पीछे हटते हैं।
पर ये पेरेंट्स के बच्चे भी तो एक कमरे में रहते हैं ना।
मैम प्राइवेट स्कूल में आप जाकर प्राइवेट स्कूल में अगर बच्चा चला जाता फिर वो 3 है उस बच्चे को बाहर निकालते तो जब भी गवर्नमेंट स्कूल ऐसा कभी नहीं करते। इसका मेन रीजन जो मैंने अपने आप में देखा उसका ये है और उसके लिए हम फाइट कर भी रहे हैं और करते भी रहेंगे।
That's very good, very good. Excellent. Excellent. Yours is a purely government school, ma'am? इनका पूरा government school है आपका? अच्छा, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल रिप्रेजेंट कर रही है। नहीं, एडेड भी होते हैं ना सर? सेमी गवर्नमेंट भी होते हैं।
There are a lot of new things that happen in the schools which they are running. Is it true? Is it false? What's the ground?
I am in Haryana. However, I know whatever I know of Delhi. There are model schools and some very old model schools. My own husband has studied from one, and it was looked upon as one of the best schools in that area, in the civil lines area. It was looked upon as one of the best schools with excellent teachers. So obviously, education it's not necessary that with a fabulous infrastructure or with beautiful surroundings and all the works, you're going to be able to empower and give your children education, which is the best. Education has got more to do with your mindset and attitudes. But in Haryana, yes, if you visit our side of Haryana, you will see a lot of new buildings, fabulous, fancy, beautiful buildings coming up, and everybody trying to vie with the other and jump on the bandwagon to teach the IB curriculum. Please come. How can we make this model work a little more efficaciously? When two systems like this, which are very diverse, when they work together, how can you make the system work here, please? I really wish more people would talk about this.
Just making roles and responsibilities very clear with little overlaps.
I think making remits responsibilities very clear, okay? With remits and responsibilities and SOPs, standard operating procedures, which are very, very clear, there would be greater transparency. Anyone else? Yes, Shashi. I hope Shashi will come out with something that will wake everybody up.
No, I want to just compliment you. It's a very difficult area to step on, and I think that is the reason you really got us all woken up and into conversation. But you know, there are very many models which over the years, and one of the tried and tested models, and then of course about the Delhi model that Karan Shekhar was talking about with Atishi and the whole group doing so much. We can talk about that also, which is, if you really get into that, you will see that there are things which are really working. And there is a possibility there. And I was just talking to this young gentleman, Arjun, who's from Kerala. And how does the Kerala government do it? They've done it. And there is a partnership model that's absolutely fabulous. And the private schools have to really, really work hard to compete with government schools. And that's what we see in some other countries, and we're not far away from that. So talking about also the right to education and how there is a certain percentage which works towards getting more and more schools, for the want of a better word there, because I think the more natural sense is to be inclusive, but we start making an effort to be inclusive. We won't get into that. So actually a lady, a while ago there was an educator who said, that, I think somewhere from Ambala, who said that, you know, you have to see what the intent of the school's promoters is. And if it is, you know, like they say, what is education? Education is idealism. What is education if it is not idealism? So a little bit of that, I think, also affects. And if there is profit, which is, it's all right to say when I'm running a business of catering, to say what are my returns. But this is an intangible area that we all work in. So there are models that will work if both parties know what the reward really is. If the reward is seamless integration.
There has to be a certain clarity, I think, when you get into a partnership like this. You need to have, both stakeholders should have certain clarity.
I would just close it by saying that we need to see which is the field that we are talking about. When we are talking about education, health, there will be many, I mean, Amartya Sen has written about it and so many others. So I think the moment you get into profiteering in education, the private-public partnership would
Cannot work, it collapse. That's why I spoke about the voucher school, because invariably a lot of these will deteriorate finally. They may start with very good intention, but invariably they will deteriorate into, crassly commercial schools.
Thank you.
Right. Any other suggestions on how we could make this model work? Transparency, we spoke, yeah.
I think with the first disclaimer before you started the session would have that no one is here to judge anyone. We see a lesser participation here, where this is a very important topic, so no one is judging. Last 5 minutes, and people who take maximum participation will get Bala movie ticket from my side. Wherever you are, Elante, Mall or PVR or wherever, Bala movie, last 5 minutes.
I'll leave it to them. Now some hands are going up. I wish you'd offered that earlier. Somebody's hand went up.
Neither that's clarity of purpose, that's partnership clarity.
Oh. Yes, please, yes.
Hello. First of all, that my option was before Bala sir. I opted earlier. So what I have understood from your total discourse after lunch, first of all government schools are not that public as you mentioned, and we have had schools in Chandigarh which was loved, adored and everybody was yearning to get admission. We have had such schools in the yesteryears. We have been a student in those times. Now, as a teacher educator, as a teacher, the scene has totally changed. Now, she has just ended very beautifully. Philanthropy is the watchword of education all over the world. It has to be the watchword when we start discussing on these topics. One more thing, in the word of inclusion, we are speaking nationally, NCRT, we are affiliated to. Inclusion is the watchword nowadays. In those days also, when we speak of bringing classes versus masses, there cannot be no comparison. Education cannot afford such dialogues to my mind. When we are speaking of public versus private, then the resources of the private sector and the innovative practices of both government and private. You said beautifully that there are some things to be taken from government sector also.
Yeah,
From the
definitely.
kids.
It's a reciprocal relationship.
I cite one little example if you allow me. We went to a school that was light versus heavy discourse. That was just questioning, that was on-site support program in a colony school, what we say in a school which is in the labor colony. Then I asked a question from the class. The question was, leaf, there is one leaf, there is one stone. Which one will drown in the water, which one will not drown in the water? The child had the beautiful answer, "Aap kya chahte hain?" This was the child's reply, that was stunning reply. I just hugged him, picked him up, and then he again said, "What do you want? Aap jo chahte hain, wahi karke dikha de." This is the street smartness. What did he say? Have a small stone, have a bigger leaf, put the stone on the leaf, both will not drown. So this is the street smartness, and we cannot just think, yes, Vygotsky said, it is socio-cultural environment that makes the learning happen, and nobody teaches anybody. That is the concept. That way, they have a lot more learning than many public schools. So we need...
No, this is not a comparison between the two.
Not
at all.
comparison, but this discourse leads to comparison. When we say they need to learn from, I would, without naming
No,
anybody...
both need to learn from. I
Yes,
said it
yes.
is reciprocal. Both need to learn.
I'm not criticizing, but I'm saying this course must go this way, that both have to benefit from each other.
Obviously.
As I said,
Why
the
would you
resources-
set up a partnership
Yes,
unless you
yes,
benefit
Yes. The
from a partnership?
resources of the private sector. Then again, lot of mushrooming in the name of private sector.
Yeah.
Our private sector is not that private, but we are discussing through public-private discourse. I mean to say, some schools have lot of resources, lot of innovativeness, and lot of inputs. Some other schools are just mushrooming. I see all over in Punjab, in Chandigarh, everywhere in the country. Such schools are also there. We have to take them into consideration. Then government schools, because I have tasted that fruit in Chandigarh, we have seen it. Although this is now a change scenario, because suddenly...
But how many and how far apart?
How many-
Compared to the private schools that we are talking about, how many and how far apart? How many government schools? Are they able to match?
Would you believe there were lines in Chandigarh also for government schools?
I'm
All
sure
because-
maybe one or two stray ones. Sir, I agree with
Many
you.
schools, many
In Delhi also there are schools like
Yes.
that.
Still we have schools which cater to lot of good students and lot
I
of
am sure.
good students. I mean to say socio-cultural status. All students are good students.
I am sure.
And मजा तो तब है कि गिरतों को थाम ले साथी जो गरीब हैं जो जिन तक सुविधाएं नहीं पहुंचती when we just cater to them when we
वही तो आइडिया है सर उस पार्टनरशिप का
Yes.
गिरतों को थाम ले.
हाँ.
That is the idea.
तो
Right.
मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ कुल मिला के कि this has to be integrated approach.
वैसे
and
उस-
this
हम
teaching
जी-
process has to change.
जब वो एक सेटअप में आ जाते हैं ना, पार्टनर्स बन जाते हैं, फिर वो गिरे नहीं रहते.
यानी गिरा कोई नहीं है, वो कपलेट की भाषा है. कुल मिला के बात ये कि प्राइवेट इस तरह से है और पब्लिक इस तरह से है, ये जरा हजम नहीं होता है.
कोई बात नहीं, 2020-30 तक hopefully it will be the other way around.
Yes. हम ये मतलब
Some concluding remarks.
वेस्टर्न पोजिंग छोड़े हम कि वो फिलैंथ्रोपिक
Sir.
मोड में है, वो लेने वाले मोड.
I think I'll go more with you,
Yeah.
though Dr. Bali is my great friend for a very long time, but I'll go with you. So I'll tell you one example only. In 1986, the last education policy came, and Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister. He was doing school product, and he was heavily criticized by the people at large and opposition in particular. ये तो दून वाले हैं, ये क्या कर सकते हैं? Because his advisors were also from Doon, Suman Dubey, Manishankar Iyer, a couple of people, Arun Singh, and they came with an idea, okay, let us bring Doon School in each district of this country. Which means that meritorious children with no means will get the same facility as Doon School. And that is what came in the form of Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya. Today in the country there are 600 Navodaya Vidyalayas and none of them is less than Doon, Mayo, Sindhya, Rajkumar, Punjab Public School, Nava. Okay? My friend Hani is not here. So that is what it is. It can be done, not that it is impossible. Thank you.
We conclude.
You have time. You have 5 minutes.
Any concluding comments? Yes, the gentleman who's a real life experience. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's actually a very brilliant topic, and first of all, I come from Kerala, and we run a school in Kerala. The fundamental thing of everything is we are all educators, and we are doing the most noblest job in the world. Doctors, nurses, engineers, whatever we are educators. We create all of them, and somewhere down the line, while building a school or doing that, the top management forgets that, for them it turns into a mere profit-making machine, I would say.
Yes.
And why I say that is because, we spoke about sustainability and how we can make schools sustainable. I honestly don't feel it's a huge task because it's my family which runs a school. There are 1,500 kids and we do not charge more than 26,000 per annum. Okay? And this year, and we've been running the school for 19 years, and this year we've pumped in more than 5 crores. And this is not the money we are taking from outdoors or anything, but this is something we managed to do something. Our agenda was very clear. Educate and not profit. Okay? So, this is something that with government or PPP or whatever, what is missing fundamentally is that over a period of time, they get cataracted by the concept of money. Okay, see, for example, in Kerala, what I see is every school, government, Colonel, you might know, government, aided, private, they strive. We have 19 years, we say we are the best school in our area, but at the end of the time, if we don't compete, we don't invest, we are not there. Why? Because government is there making sure that every kid is educated. Okay? I feel that is where the problem is. Let's have a, what are we, at the end, what is the parameter in which a school is being judged? Is it just academics? Is it the output of a student in terms of their moral behavior, whatever? So at the end of the day, there's always a parameter we can judge a school. Okay? And it is the right of the governments or any public institutions to, keep a parameter for that and, make sure that at the end of the day, those parameters are being fulfilled. Okay? So we are saying there is money which is being pumped, and if the parameter is not being fulfilled, they should stop that funding. It's as simple as that, So this is why, the basic mechanism needs to be put in place. And see, it's just not the problem of a school. Okay, we are talking about government colleges or anything. So at the end of the day, it is about putting a mechanism into things. And we need that for anything. We are talking about one of the largest country in the world, catering 1.23 billion people. So if we don't have the basic mechanisms being put into place, anything is going to be a failure. See,
SOPs, clarity, complete mechanism,
Yeah.
and also accountability.
Exactly.
And frequent reviews to see whether you really deserve to carry this partnership forward or should you stop it.
Exactly.
So there has to be a certain degree of accountability.
Yes, I think the discussion should be on that basically. No school is bad. See, at the end of the day, it's very simple. In my state, at least, I know for a fact that, the best teachers are in the government sector. The private school can never rival them, So what we do is, we try to, train them and keep training them. So what we are trying to do is, with limited resources, we are trying to, get the best out of them. And, to our advantages and to our disadvantage, the government is even more hardworking. Okay? So, which, as an educator, I should be happy. Okay, so there are a lot of times I used to crib about the fact that, what is this government doing? Do they want us to close down? But, as a citizen of this country or of this world, I should be happy with the fact that, wow, this is something that the kids in this country is growing up to. And so, as an educator, all of us should, I'm not saying Kerala model is the best, there are definitely flaws. Every model
See,
has a...
in this partnership, you are an educator. Not necessary that in a partnership there will be somebody who's motivated or is an educator. Okay, they may be into that partnership to make a certain degree of profit also. It can then deteriorate.
Exactly my point. Let's put the parameters first.
Yeah.
The
very well defined.
Yes, let's put the parameters first. The question is, what are the parameters? So, I would really like all of us to, if we can, even say to the government, see, let's come up with the parameters for all of this. We are talking about kids, we are talking about the future. One gentleman said, that we cannot talk about something 10 years apart. It's impossible. The book that was written, 21st century, 21 lessons for the 21st century by Yusuf Noura. It said, what are we training our kids for? It's impossible to predict. Because we are talking about 3D printing, artificial intelligence and augmented reality. It's such a beautiful thing, which is like, it's not something we need to be afraid about. It's something that we need to, I get so
I have
happy.
to stop you because I think there are two.
Yeah, so I just want to say, it's the parameters that we are supposed to be speaking about. Thank you.
I just know which school and where in Kerala, sir. This fragment here.
Okay, it's in Wayanad, it's a hill station in the northern part of Kerala, and the school name is Green Hills Public School.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Actually, give him a dairy milk. He's the only person who supports government.
Yeah, and also being a promoter supporting a government, great job. I just would like to add this, I was trying to speak this thing earlier. This is basically I wanted to put to the table that as per the care ratings, in 2019, the foreign direct investment in education sector is around 5,500 crores up till now. It's still rising. So the public-private partnership is likely to go big way. But here I would like to also add, yes, of course, I believe what Colonel Shekhar said, that there is a quantity in government and there's a quality in private right now. And possibly we need to make a marriage out of it so that it actually breeds something great. And I must emphasize here that we should not forget that when I say private partnership, I should not forget that I'm only talking about schools. Because all the stalls which are outside are not schools, but they're private partnership. So there is a lot of things that has happened as per the education industry where there are support systems which have started developing, and these support systems have been tested first by the private players. And then only they all kind of, once they passed the test of the private players, they came into the industry and survived further. That's what is bringing a lot of money from external sources. And it is extremely important for us to understand that it's not always wrong to look at a private player in the school, because what happens is, they're not demons. They are the first people who kind of took that challenge, and many of them did it philanthropically, but at the same time, they were the ones who took out the money and then opened more schools. Many people may not have taken away the money outside, but they have also opened up more schools. So that's how the catering is there. Yes, we need to formulate a structure which is watertight, where the things can be done better. But
I completely agree with you. Deriding the private players is not good enough.
Yes.
I completely, because there's huge money, huge investment, hard-earned money which has gone into those schools, which have now multiplied and have a ripple effect. So the money is spread all over, so they definitely deserve to earn. May I take a question finally to the last gentleman here? I think we're running out of time.
I have a point.
You?
Okay.
I'm from Kimberley, the international school. I worked with Mrs. Bali as a vice principal 5 years back. I want to show you the real picture of government schools. We are surrounded by many, many villages. Kimberley, the international school, is surrounded by Tharba, Bagwali. There's so many villages, I can't name them. We have been experienced 2 government schools there. One on the right, one on the left. I'm not going to do any comparison. I'm just showing you the picture of government schools in rural areas. India is still dominated by rural people, you know that. And there's a school, there are about 8 classes in that school. Government, I appreciate. Government is giving food, government is giving uniforms, government is giving scholarships to those kids. But there are 5, 8 classes, only 1 teacher. And on the left side, there's school, I think there are around maybe 100 students, and all classes are there. But there are 4, 5 teachers. Our students go there for social work, and whenever they go to teach, they are clicking with them. Didi, please teach us. Bhaiya, please teach us. Please teach. They are dying to learn, but they are no teachers. I appreciate the government very well. They are trying their level best, but there is no dedication in our teachers. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that.
Can I, sorry. Oh, perfect. Sorry, I've been waiting like a long time for this. So coming, I just want to give my sort of a young person's perspective. When I moved from college back to India as well, I'm a private player. I wanted to work with schools, right? I was really passionate to work in education, and I didn't have a degree. I studied economics in college, and when I graduated, I said, okay, I can form a company where I bring in different products and try to make our students more passionate. And there were a lot of schools which did not sort of, agree for maybe a commercial or something, but there were schools just like PPS and the heritage schools or the Shipnautic schools. I've had amazing principals and directors who I've worked with who have really supported our cause, right? So I think even though there is money making involved for the private players like us and for the stalls which are outside here for this conference, but we're all really passionate as well, and I think it really depends on each director or principal who sort of gives us a chance or sort of gives us a shot, and we are all trying to make a difference here. And yeah, so I just wanted to get that perspective.
So, are we on time?
Yes.
Very well.
Thank you, Dr. Bali. Can I ask Ravi Selfani to please felicitate Dr. Bali? Can we all clap for ourselves and what we